I need to tell you something that might be hard to hear. Millions of people are spending hours every day studying English, but most of them will never become fluent. Not because they're not smart enough, but because they're making the same 5 critical mistakes over and over again. In the next 10 minutes, I'm going to reveal exactly what these mistakes are and, more importantly, how you can avoid them. If you've been studying English for months or even years and you still can't speak confidently, if you understand written English but freeze up in conversation, then this video is for you. Stay with me because what I'm about to share could completely change your approach to learning English. The perfectionism trap. Let's start with the most dangerous mistake, the perfectionism trap. Here's what happens. You decide to learn English and immediately set an impossible standard for yourself. You think every sentence needs to be grammatically perfect. You believe you need to sound like a native speaker from day one. You're terrified of making mistakes because mistakes feel like failure. So what do? You stay silent. You wait until you're ready, until you know enough, until you can speak perfectly. But that day never comes. Think about how babies learn to speak. Do they wait until they can form perfect sentences? Of course not. They start with single words, then broken sentences filled with errors. Their grammar is terrible. Their pronunciation is unclear, but they keep speaking, keep practicing, and slowly they improve. But when adults learn a new language, we expect ourselves to skip all the messy stages and jump straight to fluency. This expectation becomes the very thing that prevents progress. I once knew a student who had studied English for 7 years. She knew thousands of words and could write beautifully, but in conversation, she could barely speak.
Why?
Because she had created a mental rule that she couldn't speak unless she was 100% certain her grammar was correct. So in conversations, her mind would race, checking verb tenses and word choices, and by the time she'd mentally verified everything, the conversation had moved on. She was studying English but not learning English. She was collecting knowledge but not building a skill. Here's what you need to understand. Every mistake you make actually brings you closer to fluency, not further away. When you say something wrong and someone corrects you, that correction creates a powerful memory. You're much more likely to remember the right way after making a mistake than if you just read it in a textbook. But if you never speak because you're afraid of mistakes, you never get corrections, and you never improve. Successful English learners understand that fluency isn't about perfection. It's about communication. It's about getting your message across even if your grammar isn't perfect, even if you make mistakes along the way. Starting right now, give yourself permission to make mistakes. In fact, expect them. Every mistake is proof that you're actually practicing, actually trying, actually learning. Your goal is not to speak perfect English. Your goal is to speak better English today than you did yesterday. Mistake 2. Not enough listening. The second major mistake is focusing on output before input. Most beginners try to speak from day one. They practice making sentences, they work on pronunciation, and they get frustrated when they can't express themselves clearly. But here's what they're missing. Before you can output language effectively, you need to input language extensively. Your brain is a pattern recognition machine. When you expose yourself to a language repeatedly, your brain automatically identifies patterns. It notices which words appear together, how sentences are structured, what rhythm sounds like, and how native speakers actually use the language. But this pattern recognition requires hours of exposure.
Think about it this way.
If you've never heard music before, you can't play the piano because you don't have any reference for what music should sound like. You need to listen extensively before you can create. Language works exactly the same way. When you listen to English regularly, several important things happen. Your brain absorbs correct pronunciation automatically. You internalize grammar patterns without consciously studying them. You develop a natural sense of rhythm and intonation. And you learn how native speakers actually use English. Not textbook English that nobody really speaks, but real natural English with common phrases and conversational patterns. But here's the problem. Many learners do try to listen, but they do it wrong. They put on an English movie in the background while cooking or scrolling their phone. That's not really learning, because your brain needs focused attention to identify patterns. Or they listen to content far too difficult, where they can't understand more than 20%. That doesn't work either, because your brain can't identify patterns when everything is incomprehensible noise. Effective listening means choosing content slightly above your current level, where you understand 60 to 80%. It means listening actively with full attention, not passively in the background. It means listening to the same content multiple times. And it means choosing content that actually interests you, because motivation dramatically improves learning. Here's what successful learners do. They dedicate the first few months almost exclusively to listening. They might listen for an hour or two every day, building up massive input before focusing on output. And when they finally start speaking, it comes much more naturally because their brain already has all these patterns stored and ready to use. If you're a beginner, spend at least 60 to 70% of your study time on listening. Make it your priority, your foundation. 15 minutes minimum every single day, no excuses. Over time, these minutes add up to hundreds of hours of input, and that's when English stops feeling foreign and starts feeling natural. Mistake 3. Learning words instead of phrases. The third mistake is learning vocabulary wrong. Here's what most people do. They download a vocabulary app or buy a book and start memorizing individual words. 10 new words every day, or 20, or 50. They create flashcards, review regularly, test themselves. After a few months, they've technically learned hundreds of words. But then something frustrating happens. They try to use these words in conversation and can't remember them. Or they remember them but don't know how to use them correctly. Or they use them but sound unnatural. All those hours memorizing words produced very little actual improvement. What went wrong? The problem is learning words in isolation, and that's not how language works. Let me give you an example. Imagine you learn the word catch. You know it means to grab something moving through the air. But do you know we say catch a cold when we get sick? Or that catch up means to reach someone ahead of you? Or that catch on means to understand something? Just this one word has dozens of uses depending on context and surrounding words. You can't learn all this from a flashcard showing just the word catch and a basic definition. Here's the principle. Never learn words alone. Always learn words as part of phrases or complete sentences. Instead of memorizing learn make a decision, make a mistake, make progress, make an effort. Instead of learning learn take a break, take a chance, take care, take place. This approach is more effective because you're learning not just what a word means, but how it's actually used. You understand which words commonly appear together, which is crucial for sounding natural. You're giving your brain context, and context makes memory stronger. And you're learning ready-to-use chunks of language that you can plug directly into conversations. You don't have to construct sentences from scratch. There's also the obsession with learning rare, advanced words. Many learners study words like serendipity or ephemeral that native speakers rarely use. Meanwhile, they haven't mastered the most common 2,000 words that make up the vast majority of daily communication. The most important words aren't the fancy, impressive ones. They're simple, common words like get, go, take, make, have that appear in hundreds of phrases. Before learning advanced vocabulary, master the most common 2,000 words. These account for 80 to 90% of normal conversation. Quality beats quantity every time. It's better to deeply know 100 phrases, to use them confidently, than to superficially know 1,000 words you've memorized but can't actually use. Mistake 4. Not speaking enough. Now, the most critical mistake of all. Not practicing speaking. You cannot learn to speak English without actually speaking. You cannot develop fluency by studying. You cannot become confident by reading textbooks. You must practice the actual skill you're trying to develop, and that means speaking regularly, consistently, repeatedly. Yet most learners find endless ways to avoid this. They tell themselves they need to study more before they're ready to speak. They convince themselves they'll start practicing once they know enough grammar. But these are just excuses to avoid discomfort. And by avoiding speaking practice, they guarantee they'll never become good at speaking. Why do people avoid it so much? Fear. Fear of making mistakes. Fear of sounding stupid. Fear of being judged. These fears are completely understandable, but here's what you need to know. This discomfort is not a sign something's wrong. It's a sign you're learning. Growth happens outside your comfort zone. The most successful learners embrace this discomfort rather than avoiding it. They accept that speaking will feel awkward at first and do it anyway. But here's the good news. You don't need a conversation partner to practice. You can practice alone, and in many ways practicing alone is actually better, especially at first. Real speaking practice means actually producing sounds with your mouth, training your muscles to form English words and sentences. Here's the simplest way to start. Describe your environment in English. Look around and narrate what you see. I'm sitting in my room. There's a window on my left. I can see trees outside. This might feel silly, but it's incredibly effective. You're building mental pathways that connect ideas to English words in a zero-pressure environment. Once comfortable, describe your actions throughout the day. When making breakfast, narrate the process. I'm taking eggs from the refrigerator. Now I'm cracking them into a bowl. This forces you to convert immediate experience into English words without translating from your native language. Another powerful technique is telling stories from your own life. Think about something interesting that happened recently and tell that story out loud in English. Don't write it first. Just speak. Pause when you need to think. Make mistakes and correct yourself. You can also practice by explaining concepts you understand well. Imagine explaining how to cook your favorite dish or why you enjoy your hobby in English. All these techniques work, but require discipline. Nobody will remind you or hold you accountable. Link your speaking practice to daily activities. If you commute, describe what you see in English. If you exercise, narrate your workout. If you cook, describe the process. By attaching practice to existing habits, you make it much more likely to happen consistently. If you want to speak fluently, you must speak regularly. Not study about speaking, not prepare to speak, but actually speak. Daily practice, even just 10 minutes, produces more improvement than hours of grammar study. Mistake 5. Inconsistent practice. The fifth fatal mistake is inconsistency. Many people study intensely for a few days or weeks, then stop completely. They practice 2 hours one day, then nothing for a week. This approach doesn't work because your brain needs regular, repeated exposure to build and maintain language skills. When you practice inconsistently, you spend most of your time reviewing what you've forgotten since the last session instead of making new progress. Learning English is a marathon, not a sprint. Consistency matters more than intensity. It's far better to practice 30 minutes every single day than 3 hours once a week. Daily practice keeps the language fresh and allows your brain to continuously process and consolidate learning. Whatever routine you create, make sure it's sustainable. Don't burn yourself out with an intense schedule you can't maintain. Build habits you can keep for months and years. A simple daily plan might look like this. 10 minutes of listening to English content you enjoy. 10 minutes of speaking practice, describing your day or telling a story. 10 minutes of reading out loud from a book or article. That's just 30 minutes, but done every single day. It's incredibly powerful. Make English a natural part of your life rather than a separate study activity. Change your phone to English. Watch shows you'd watch anyway, but in English. Follow English social media about topics you're interested in. The more you integrate English into daily life, the more exposure you get without it feeling like extra work. Remember, every single day of practice moves you forward. You might not notice progress day to day, but compare yourself to 3 or 6 months ago and the improvement will be obvious. So there you have it. The 5 fatal mistakes keeping people stuck in beginner English. Stop chasing perfection and embrace mistakes. Prioritize listening to build your foundation. Learn phrases instead of isolated words. Speak every single day, even if you're alone. And practice consistently, not intensely. Avoid these mistakes. Follow these principles, and you will see progress you never thought possible. Fluency isn't a destination you suddenly arrive at. It's a gradual development through hundreds of hours of practice. But every hour brings you closer. One day you'll be having a conversation in English and realize you're not struggling anymore, not translating in your head, not searching for words. You're just communicating naturally and confidently. That day will come if you stay committed. Thank you for watching. If this helped you, like this video and subscribe for more content supporting your English learning journey. Now go practice, keep improving, and remember that every mistake brings you one step closer to fluency.